BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hi there, you're listening to the Farming Today podcast. I'm Stefan Messenger. On today's programme, restrictions on moving livestock across the Welsh border are eased, but only for animals vaccinated against Bluetongue.
It's a small step towards allowing increased trade. What this change means is if they're sold to Welsh vendors, they can come back without any further testing required.
More on that later. But let's stay in Wales, shall we? Where a new rural crime strategy launched recently made heritage crime or damage to ancient monuments a particular focus. There are fears treasure thieves are targeting Wales's most ancient sites in an attempt to unearth rare and valuable artefacts for the black market. Roman ruins, hill forts, standing stones, and even graveyards have been pillaged by rogue metal detectorists known as nighthawkers, who use the cover of darkness to sneak onto protected sites and dig for treasure. Authorities say they receive up to 20 reports of nighthawking at Wales's most precious historical monuments each year. BBC Wales's Will Fife has more.
Darkness is falling, and officers from Gwent Police are beginning their night shift, patrolling ancient sites on the hunt for would-be treasure thieves.
Yeah, that's the old Roman walls. Everything this side of the wall is a scheduled monument, so it's legally protected.
PC Dan Council has been searching for so-called nighthawkers ever since this graveyard on his patch was targeted 5 years ago.
In excess of 50 holes, I think, were counted at the time, including on top of graves. What was actually found in the holes themselves, we don't know. It could have been nothing, or it could have been, a really important artefact.
Experts fear organised crime networks could be involved in some of the activity, with any valuable finds potentially being smuggled abroad for the black market. 2 years after PC Council's first case, his team had uncovered more than 20 suspected cases of nighthawking.
Reports of people in fields at night, reports around the holes that people were discovering, signs of soil disturbance.
One of the biggest concerns is that most nighthawking incidents reported to police are happening at scheduled ancient monuments, Wales's most precious historical sites, which are protected by law and often busy with visitors in daylight hours. Last year, police received reports of nighthawking activity in the woods of this ancient hill fort near Newport. They don't know what, if anything, was taken. Dr. Jonathan Berry is the man in charge of protecting ancient monuments at Cadw, the Welsh Government's Historic Environment Service.
We probably see 10, 20 of these incidents a year in Cadw, but we know that the number is underreported, and you can find very quickly items of significant rarity and value can be out of the country and in other collections.
Back near Chepstow, it's almost midnight, and police are using a drone to survey the churchyard where nighthawkers dug into graves. It uses thermal technology to help them spot a person against the pitch black. The tech is new, but it's already helped them catch one suspicious individual out in the fields at night.
We had a report about a suspicious vehicle near to one of our protected sites. He chose to hide behind a pile of manure. Well, as we were scanning around, although we couldn't see him, we could see clear footprints through the manure where he just disturbed it. And lo and behold, when we wandered over to that site, the male was face down, unable to really give an explanation as to why he was face down next to a pile of manure in the middle of a field.
The hope now is that with increased public awareness and the new technology, more might be stopped before they have the chance to steal a piece of history.
Will Fife with that report. And from looting to lettuce. All this week we're shining a light on the UK's salad growers. Synthetic fertiliser is one of the biggest costs for salad production, not to mention its environmental impacts. Now one producer, G's, on the Cambridgeshire Fens, says trials of a new composting technique called Johnson Sue has led to a reduction in fertiliser use as well as increased crop health. Our reporter, Nina Pullman, met the company's manager for future farming, Lucy Harler, in the midst of some little gem lettuce.
Absolutely everything in here has been through a worm at least once. But you can see that we've basically created soil So we've effectively
it's like a really
created...
nice crumbly looking composty soil, isn't it?
It's slightly damp to the touch still.
You can smell it. It smells really rich.
It's that very rich kind of humic material.
Could you explain what Johnston Sue is for someone who's never come across it in a nutshell?
So Johnston Sue is a method of composting. It's a static aerobic composting method, and it leads to a compost that is fungally dominant, so has a much better fungal to bacterial ratio than we will find in our soils.
Tell me what crops you're using this on and what kind of impact it's had.
We're applying this as standard now across all of our salad crops, and we've seen great success in terms of the nutritional availability to the plant. So where we've been using Johnston Sue in conjunction, stacking it with the other regenerative principles, cover cropping, minimum tillage, and creating this system where we've got a much healthier ecosystem, we've been able to reduce fertiliser. For example, on iceberg lettuce this year, we've had a further 40% reduction in base fertiliser. That's on top of reductions from previous years, and that's with no impact on yield. So we've reduced our fertiliser, we're producing the same yield and really healthy crops. We're here at the site of some little gem planting in the Cambridgeshire Fens.
The tractor's gone past with a big container full of dark liquid on the front.
Yeah, so we've made a biological extract from our Johnston Sue compost, and we are applying it under the blocks of little gems so that when the roots come out of the blocks, they are directly in contact with a really rich microbial environment.
Hi!
So this is Harriet. Harriet is our little gem agronomist.
This field's quite an exciting one. Across all 7 pools, every single one has a different rate of Johnston Sue and a different rate of base fertiliser.
And what are you expecting to see?
Hopefully some really lovely plants.
Why are you looking at the different rates of application for the Johnston Sue? Obviously you know it works in some level, but what are you kind of fine-tuning at this point?
So obviously the end goal is to try and reduce our synthetic fertiliser as much as possible. If we can go lower with our synthetic fertilisers and up the Johnston Sue, and if that has the same effect, realistically we're not looking for any difference across the field in crop quality, but because we've changed the fertiliser that the plants are getting, we want to see that Johnston Sue is at the same standard that our synthetic stuff's at.
We're still learning about what rates are optimum. We started the season applying at 100 litres per hectare. That was kind of industry standard, I guess, if you could call it that. Not that Johnston Sue is industry standard, but it's kind of what had been recommended to us and what we've seen in previous trials. But actually, off the back of the positive trials we've seen on the disease suppression with the onions and managing to grow potatoes with no applied nitrogen on higher rates of Johnston Sue, we've started to trial this year, upping the rates, finding an answer to the question, can there be too much? We've not found it yet, if too much does exist. It's really getting that balance between what's practical. I mean, we're looking at producing over 450,000 litres of it this summer to service just our salad crops and roots.
Do you think you might get to a point where you don't need any synthetic fertiliser on the lettuce?
Honestly, I don't see a point where we will be zero applied synthetic fertiliser across all our crops. And I don't think we need to be. I think it's really about learning what we can get away with, learning what the minimum is. Where we have to use synthetic fertiliser, how can we be choosing more sustainable sources? For example, when we're looking at nitrogen, looking at the types of nitrogen that we're applying to the crop, do we need to be applying ammonium nitrate, or can we be applying more organic forms of nitrogen that are much, much gentler on soil health and soil biology? There's no one else doing this on this scale in this type of crop, so we're learning as we go and developing as we do it.
Nina Pullman reporting there. Routine border checks on live animal imports from the European Union are to be suspended ahead of the introduction of the UK's new SPS, or sanitary and phytosanitary deal, with the EU. The government said the agreement would cut costs and red tape for businesses while speeding up trade in food. Ministers said the suspension would be reviewed on an ongoing basis to ensure that UK biosecurity was safeguarded. Border checks on EU fruit and vegetable imports have already been scrapped in anticipation of the new UK-EU trade deal struck in May. Now, since the start of July, trade in livestock between England and Wales has been affected by restrictions designed to stop the spread of Bluetongue disease. As we've reported many times, the midge-borne virus poses no threat to public health or food safety, but can be fatal for animals like sheep, cattle and goats. This week, there's been an important update to the rules, with vaccinated livestock from Wales now allowed to be transported into England without the need for a costly pre-movement test. Sheep and cattle that have been jabbed can be taken to a market within 12 miles of the Welsh border, such as Hereford, Ludlow and Oswestry. These markets will have to hold dedicated sales of Welsh-only vaccinated stock and adhere to strict guidelines. Moving farm animals from England into Wales without a licence and a negative test is still prohibited for now, though the Welsh Government is proposing further changes in mid-September. Speaking at Dolgellau Livestock Mart in North West Wales, farmer Ryan Thomas said the restrictions had driven up prices locally.
Buying calves from Drayton and Shrewsbury, that's obviously on stop now because I can't go over the border. So I've had to buy in Wales, made it down to Llanybydder. Prices have risen because Welsh farmers are buying stock in Wales. So everybody wants them, so it's just pushed the price up.
Sheep farmer Aled Roberts, meanwhile, said he was weighing up whether to vaccinate his flock.
Do you go out there and make a decision? Yeah, I'm going to vaccinate, or are you going to drag on and see how it pans out?
There have been no cases of Bluetongue in Wales so far this year, and the government in Cardiff is saying it's trying to keep it that way for as long as possible. Phil Thomas is a vet from Aberystwyth and a director of the Wales Veterinary Science Centre. I asked him how significant a change this easing of restrictions was for Welsh farmers.
It is a significant change. It's a small step towards allowing increased trade. Sheep and cattle who have completed their vaccination course can go to markets and the sort of the 15, 16-mile proximity to the Welsh border and be sold onto vendors in England, as they were previously. But what this change means is that if they're sold to Welsh vendors, is that they can come back without any further testing required.
And the easing of restriction only applies, as you say, to farmers who vaccinated their livestock. But the latest figures show that there aren't that many of them, are there? We're talking about fewer than 1% of Wales's sheep jabbed so far, between 5 and 10% of the country's cattle.
The levels of vaccination is low, especially in the west, where people possibly think it's not going to come as far west as where they are. The vaccination has been greatest on the sort of the western edge of England, so the sort of the border counties, Shropshire, Cheshire, etc., and down through Oxfordshire, Hampshire. So those areas have got the highest vaccination levels so far. And in Wales, it mirrors that, in that it's the sort of the eastern areas that have the highest proportion. In fact, the cattle proportion in the Vale of Glamorgan is probably one of the highest that there is in the country. So the message is getting through. It's patchy, but we need to have that sort of increased awareness and increased levels of vaccination.
What about English farmers who want to take their animals to livestock markets in Wales? No easing of restrictions for them for now?
Not for now, but I think that is planned for September. It depends on the weather, it depends on the disease situation, and it'll depend on whether they're vaccinated.
But we're approaching, aren't we, a really important time with sales of breeding stock, and you'll know that farming leaders, livestock markets are warning of a considerable disruption. The Welsh Conservatives have gone as far as to say the approach in Wales is draconian. It's set to have a devastating impact, they say. What do you say to that?
Well, it depends who you talk to across the country. I mean, it'll have greater effect on a lot of people who trade near the border. There's no doubt about that. Other areas, the impact is very, very minimal. But the main sort of balancing act that the government have to do, and there are costs and there are dangers of trade restrictions, but there are also dangers in free movement and spread of disease. So it's a very fine balancing act. But in Wales and Scotland, we don't have the disease and we don't particularly want it, as we are very stock dense in Wales and we haven't really seen the effects of Bluetongue in stock dense areas of the UK yet.
Phil Thomas there from the Wales Veterinary Science Centre in Aberystwyth. And that's all we have time for this morning. I'm Stefan Messenger, the producer is Rebecca Rooney, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.